Um, can everybody hear me? I can't seem to get that. I'm just going to start. I guess we've got everything. Sound is on. Sorry. Hold on. We are live. It's showing live. So, can everybody hear me? Is it the sound should be on? All right. I'm still struggling with the technical stuff on these things. All right. We'll struggle through. I'm pretty sure we have this going. You do?
Yeah.
It says,
I'm up.
and you see, anybody acknowledge that they have sound? Welcome to the live chat. Everybody got
Yes.
Hello. Yes. Okay. Here we go. So, my name is Phil Jones. I'm an ex-Scientologist, and today we're going to cover Scientology, Art of War, basically Scientology at war. And the location I chose for this broadcast is it's a battlefield from the War of 1812, and behind me, if you can see it, that across the water there, that's the United States. And that is that's old Fort Niagara. That fort's been there since the 18th century, but it was very key during the War of 1812 because it's right at the mouth of the Niagara River. Behind me there, kind of this way, is Lake Ontario, and straight across that way is Toronto. And then to my left over there is Fort George, the Canadian fort. Sort of, so you got the American fort on one side. Well, it was actually the British fort at the time. Back in the early 1800s, this was a British part of the British Commonwealth. So this area right here where we are, General Sir Isaac Brock, that was his command post at Fort George, and he when there was a battle in 1813 when the Americans were attacking. And there was about 1,000 of the British soldiers, along with some of the indigenous and some freed slaves. And they found out that the Americans were going to be flanking them with about 5,000 soldiers. So they bolted and they left the area. The Americans took over. Oh, somebody from Ireland. I have a great little, I got to set this as an aside. 50 years after about 40 or 50 years after the War of 1812, there was an Irish militia who they started working on attacking, like fighting to take over Canada, because what they wanted to do was they wanted to basically take over Canada so they could trade with the British for North Ireland. And unfortunately, they didn't have a big enough army. They only had 1,000, and they were kind of being chased. They jumped across the river over to the States. The Americans arrested them, threw them all in jail. So unfortunately, Ireland, I guess, or fortunately, I don't know, however you look at the politics of it. Anyway, the area we're in, the British did end up taking the area back, and it was kind of a draw as far as territory went. But so the only thing to add on the whole War of 1812 thing was the reason for the war was that the British were they were kind of limiting the trade for the Americans trading with Europe, and then they were also raiding American ships and conscripting some of their sailors into the British Navy. So Americans didn't like that, and they got a little complaining about it. So anyway, Scientology and the Art of War. So Scientology has always had a concept of being at war. I mean, even they've got their Navy uniforms, and Hubbard had the whole military ranks, you know, captain, and it was a lot of military stuff, and calling people sir, and I think even in the Sea Org there was some saluting going on and stuff like that. But as far as they've always kind of had this quality, because it's always been part of the Scientology conditioning and the policies and everything that goes along with it. Even with public, when they're like, there's a thing called the admin scale, which is short for administration scale, which it's to kind of plan out your strategy for overtaking. Like if you have a business and you want to go, I want to take over this sector of business. Well, you would, part of your admin scale that you would do a strat plan, a strategic plan, which is kind of the overall thing. And then under that, you would have battle plans. So the battle plan is more of a more immediate, like, okay, we need to like put out an ad for this and get this market here and do this. It's a sort of a short-term battle plan that leads towards the achieving the goal of the strategic plan. So that was all part of, like, in Scientology. With targets and stuff, I covered kind of that anyway. And that comes from military. I mean, that's again like the whole Hubbard thing on battle plans and military. And is there a reason females are called Sir in Scientology? Is that based on military structure too? That I'm not sure. I was never in the Sea Org, but I think it was just. I honestly don't know if they do that in the military, whether they refer to women as Sir as well. I'm not sure on that. Someone to answer that would be someone like Mark Headley or Mark Fisher, or somebody that was in the Sea Org would know that, or Janice Grady would definitely be able to tell you that. In Scientology, there's always been these kind of, like, things that come up that kind of everybody sort of kind of joins into. A lot of times there's multi-level marketing things that become the fad, the thing of the day. Back some years and years ago, there was a book called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. I never read it, but it was really big in Scientology, where a lot of people were reading it. And I can see just from the title it would appeal to Scientologists, because they're very conspiracy-minded sort of thing. A lot of them, a lot of conspiracies out there, and that part of that again comes from Hubbard. So one time, I think it was the late '90s, a book called Art of War, like Sun Tzu's Art of War, and it went big. Around where we were in Clearwater anyway, there was a lot of people reading it. It was big, and people, I mean, even public Scientologists, it wasn't a matter of whether that we were in a war, but they always had that sort of at war concept in their heads, like, not that they're fighting somebody, but they're trying to take over the world. So in a lot of Scientologists' minds, they are at war, whether it's the psychs, whether it's just to take over, like handle the planet or whatever. But there's a question here. They didn't plan too well if members are leaving in droves. No. Absolutely, not a very good plan. Oh, there's another one here. I called Emily. Oh, save that one for me. Sorry, Willie's looking at all the comments. I can't see them up here for some reason. They're not popping up. Normally they do. She's reading the comments. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt here. So there's a policy letter that Hubbard wrote. I'm going to read a few quotes from this, and because it's pretty intense. Not really long, so I'm not going to sort of read on and on here. But these are actual Hubbard quotes from a policy letter Hubbard wrote called Battle Tactics, written in 1969. It says, quote, "If you uniformly apply the tactics and strategy of battle to the rows we get into, press or legal or public confrontation, you will win." So what he's saying there is that for whatever, protesters, legal attacks, bad press, you apply the tactics and strategy of battle. And that was a quote from Hubbard in this policy letter. So that's why you get this kind of, like, they're just fighting. It's almost like they're in a war, and they are. That's how they think. That's how they think. They're in a war, and that if they win, they're going to lose their eternity or something kind of like that. The other quote is, quote, "One parallels in the field of thought what is used and done in the field of battle in other ages." So, and I think there he's probably talking about the things like Sun Tzu, Art of War, where they take strategies that were successful in the past and kind of utilize them in the present. You know, like just different things like infiltration and stuff like that. So, and that they definitely do. They use a lot of those tactics. And so the other quote here. Quote, we must ourselves fight on a basis of total attrition of the enemy, so never get reasonable about him. Just go all the way in and obliterate him. So that's the concept. And this is Hubbard Quote. That's right out of that policy letter. And so they don't just want to kind of win a battle. They want to obliterate the enemy. And if that's something they recently arrested I saw that, and I think it's a good thing that those who are breaking the law are, rightfully arrested for it. I mean, where the guy attacked, he came at her. He was going across. He turned and came right at her, and there was no question that was an attack on her. I think I have one more quote in here. Let me have a look. So then these are Hubbard's words. Yeah, this is the last one here. Wars are composed of many battles. Never treat a war like a skirmish. Treat all skirmishes like wars. So what that means is that you got a few protesters out there, or you get a news article or somebody doing this or doing that they don't like, and if they don't like it enough and they consider it a skirmish, they're going to war over it. And that's why you see attacks by these guys. They're in a war, and you might be standing out there going, yeah, I'm just walking up the street and I'm holding a sign, or I'm chalking the sidewalk. That's a skirmish. But in their mind, per Hubbard, they're going to treat that skirmish like a war, and that's how they're going to react. So you have to be aware of that we've been attacked for 10 years now. We've had everything, the lawyers, and some serious lawyer stuff coming after us. We've had PIs, we've had hate pages, yeah, all of it. So, but you know what? What worse are they going to do to us than take our kids? So we're in it for the duration. So a couple other points. That the IAS fund, when it came out in 1986, I think it was a little earlier, maybe. No, it was earlier. Anyway, whatever, early 80s. It was positioned as and promoted as a fund, a war chest in case of future attacks. And so, and again, the terminology is all the war chest. And we need the money for the war chest for attacks, war attacks. That's another thing that kind of generates this whole at-war mentality in Scientologists. So, yeah, some of the enemies that they perceive out there, aside from current protesters and likes, psych drugs that are out there, well, actually all drugs. They're against all drugs pretty much. Medical professionals, for the most part, they're against medical professionals if the medical professionals are are prescribing drugs to their patients or doing the standards. You got a medical professional who's kind of leaning into the natural, and they're a Scientologist and they're donating money, they're going to be more inclined to not consider them an enemy. Fair game, that's a OSA thing where it's about defeating an enemy and destroying them utterly. So that, and another thing, when you route into an org or onto a course, anything you do in Scientology, and this has always been the case, even back in the 70s when Willie and I started, at some point in very early, and sometimes before you even get on any auditing, they'll sit you down on a meter, and they'll ask questions like, are you here for any other reason than you state? Or do you work for an intelligence agency? Are you are you a reporter? Or, I don't know all the questions, but they're basically they're interrogating you to see if you are a spy. So they're, you know, that's all part of their you know, their whole vibe of like I say, it's all geared around the war with Scientology. They're we're outside here. It's a little windy, so my papers are blowing all over here. Um, so then I'm going to go back to this. So in Scientology, Hubbard said everyone is in some condition of existence. And so he kind of wrote them all down. And these are the conditions of existence that they go from, like, at the top, power, affluence, normal operation. So those are the things like, you know, if you're normal, means you're just kind of operating, whether your company or your life or your family or whatever. If things are going along okay, you're considered normal. Affluence means you're doing really well. Power means you're doing great. If you're in power, and especially in Scientology, if you're in power, they consider you making a lot of money. It's a lot of having to do with money. And then below that, normal, you get into emergency. And emergency means that you're kind of slipping a little bit, maybe, and, you know, so you're in a condition. And each of these conditions have, Hubbard wrote like a formula that you do to kind of get yourself up to the next one. A lot of Scientologists do these things often early in their career, but because they don't really, these formulas don't usually make any kind of change. I don't know of anybody that does them that much in their lives. They really don't. They usually just kind of drop stuff out. A lot of them will put, maybe like in a business, sometimes they'll do an organizing board, but they'll post it up on the wall. They'll post all the things, and then they'll leave it there, and that's the end of. They won't mess with it after that. They don't use it for management. Then you get down to danger, meaning you're kind of in a position where if you don't do something, you're going to get in trouble. Non-existence means, like, say you're in a business and you're kind of almost completely out of customers. That would be non-existence. Liability means, like in an org, if you're in liability, that means you've kind of done something, or you're acting sort of against the interests of Scientology or the org itself. And when you're in liability, and to get out of liability, you have to kind of do all sorts of stuff to make up damages. And then you have to go around and kind of ask everybody for permission to kind of get back in the group. And then there's doubt. And the doubt formula is basically, do you want to be here or you don't want to be here? You have to look at both sides. But always, when a Scientologist does a doubt formula, they never end up leaving, at least during the doubt formula. I don't know why. You'd think that if they actually looked at Scientology and looked at the outside honestly, but they don't, because there's always that self-editing little thing in your head when you're a Scientologist. You always, before you even finish the doubt form, you just know at the end of it, you're going to have to come with, oh yeah, I realize I was whatever anyway, and you're back in Scientology. And the next one below that is enemy. And the formula for enemy is find out who you are, who you really are. I think that's how it goes. Yeah, let me see. I think I wrote it down. Yeah, maybe not. Find out who you really are. Anyway, I think it's find out who you really are. So, so really, you're going to kind of decide, oh yeah, I'm a Scientologist, and yada yada. So, below that, you have treason. Now, treason means you've kind of committed an act that Scientology considers like really, really bad. And treason, and again, the military mindset. But I'll tell you, I was assigned treason once when I was doing OT3 in the UK. And when you go from your auditing room to the examiner, you put all your papers in your briefcase, you lock the briefcase, spin locks, and you have to tie your briefcase to your wrist. So one day, I forgot to spin the locks. I walked to the examiner. I sat down there. Oh, didn't spin the locks. Spun the locks. Examiner goes, oh, no. Go to the MAA, the ethics officer. And what did I get? Treason. That was the worst thing in the world you could do. I said to the ethics officer, the MAA, I said, nobody could get to that case. It was tied to my wrist. But no, sorry, you're in treason. So I had to do all those conditions all the way up to be able to get back on auditing again before, anyway. So treason can be like, you know, you're mud because you did something really bad, or you could forget to spin the locks on your case with your OT level materials. Scientology, yeah, it's arbitrary. It's all a stupid balance anyway. They just have, you know what? They don't have a sense of humor. Everything is too serious for them. Oh, you didn't spin your lock. So, you know, somebody could have come along and opened that. No. That's a treason. So aside from having interrogation in their spies, Scientology has their own spies that go into places. Back in the Snow White days, in the 70s, Scientology and the Guardian's office, they infiltrated police departments, the IRS. I think that from what I heard all around the world, they had something like 5,000 spies or something. Anyway, and the same in Canada. They actually got caught in Canada as well. There were 9. We knew most of them. They were like all friends of ours, but we never had anything to do with that, fortunately. Almost, but I got asked to break into something and I refused. But all those guys, actually, after that happened, they had I was asked into this sort of meeting that they had in the org, in the Toronto, after the whole raid and everything took place in Toronto. Cops, there was 100 cops that arrived at the org and raided it, took all the folders, everything. And so afterwards they had a meeting, and you said, you know, it was like, I don't know what the purpose of the meeting was. It seemed kind of strange, but it was all to talk about the Guardian's office. And I was sort of peripheral in that I was what they called a GAS member, Guardian Assistant Staff, or something, just an external person who does stuff occasionally for them. And they were getting me to do stuff, but it was pretty lame, and they were really amateur at it. So, well, so was I. I mean, it's untrained. It was just ludicrous stuff. But I just, when they wanted me to do something illegal, I just refused, and that was the end of my Guardian's office career. So I went into this meeting, and they went around from person to person and said, so do you have anything to say about any considerations about your time in the Guardian's office? I don't know whether they were trying to dig out some information. Maybe they were looking for a spy, actually. Oh, they were looking for a police plant or something. There was one in the org, but he worked in Treasury, from what I heard later. Anyway, so they came around to me, and they said, well, yeah, of course, she asked me to do something illegal. There's no fucking way I'm doing anything illegal for you guys. and Jackie said, oh, they didn't. Anyway, it was just kind of silent at that point, but I was pissed. I actually was pretty pissed at. There's no way I was going to do something illegal for them. Anyway, man, I got through that in like 20 minutes. Holy smokes, I just talked a mile a minute, didn't I? But there were things that have to do in Toronto or in Scientology. It's the mindset of Scientologists, though, that you got to realize that they, to one degree or another, consider that they are at war, and they act that way. And you see that on the ground. You see these live streamers around Big Blue being attacked and being, and you know, just with everything Scientology's got, because they are treating those skirmishes as war, and they're going to do what Hubbard says, and that is try to obliterate the enemy. Now, it's difficult for them to do without getting caught for doing something illegal. They're starting to get arrested. Not a bad thing. If they're breaking the law, you know, you know, handcuff them, because, you know, that's not okay. Scientology's gotten away with so many abuses and illegal things over the years that it really wouldn't be a bad thing to see some justice coming at them. And so, you know, I'm glancing here in the background, and this area, to think that this was a battlefield at one point, when a republic, we were expected to treat outside people differently. Example, when you interacted with the bank, post office, public people, we weren't expected.
You have to have your PR in.
That which?
Your PR had to be in.
Yeah, I guess to a degree. I mean, you had to kind of always have in mind that you're presenting kind of for Scientology a little bit, but in the Scientology mindset, you're also considering there's this superiority thing too, that everyone you're dealing with. I mean, you know, we didn't have too much because we were kind of public, and we had, you know, we were a little more connected with the outside world than a lot of people, but there is a sort of a superiority thing with a lot of people, because they think that Scientologists will think that they have the answer to the universe, and the WOGs don't. I don't care if they're a professor in a university or a scientist creating life-saving drugs. They are, which is strange, inferior. You know. Yeah, they're going to be inferior to a Scientologist because they don't have the tech. But never seen. So, yeah, I had somebody approach me recently, and it turns out they're in Indy. I won't mention the name, but, you know, they were asking me, you know, what I think about, you know, well, first I didn't say anything negative because I don't like to do that. Oh, are we back now? We are back. We lost the signal there a minute. Okay. All right. That's a scary thing. Anyway, I just told it like it was, you know, that nobody's ever had any of the attributes of clear after 74 years. I've yet to see anyone who has even an iota of that, let alone an OT who can't move a paperclip across the table. You know, and then some of them will brag about how they can move storms away from flag. There was a well-known OT8 in Clearwater who, anytime the hurricane was coming to the Gulf, I'd see these texts going to this guy saying, "So, Jim, are you going to handle that storm for us?" And, you know, the storms, for them to get to Clearwater, they have to kind of curve around Florida. Typically, they'd go straight up or across to Texas. So it was difficult for us to start. Sometimes they did, the storms would, but inevitably they'd kind of miss, and, you know, statistically. But yeah, he would just, you know, sort of be the cool guy about he's going to move the storm. I'm thinking, yeah, go for it, Jim. I know. I had an ex-brother-in-law who was on OT7, where you audit body thetans. And when you're on OT5, you're auditing body thetans that are in your own body. But I think on OT7, I didn't do OT7, but I think you're auditing body thetans that can be outside the body as well. And supposedly you can handle physical ailments. So anyway, at one period of time, I think it was in the 80s, I was having these headaches, and my brother-in-law would go in session, come out and say, "Oh, you feel better now?" I said, "No, I don't." And he'd go again. So after about 3 or 4 times, he stopped asking me. Why did I not get out then? You know, it's so weird. Anyway, so anyway, if anybody has any questions, it doesn't have to be about the whole Scientology art of war thing. I think I covered sort of a good chunk of it, enough that just to give an idea of how the mindset is in Scientology, as far as that they consider they're at war and how they treat that and what they're doing. Actually, what I might do, I'll try to get this policy posted up in my in that, whatever you call it, that section in YouTube, so you can actually read the whole policy. It's quite interesting. The whole
DOA has a question.
Yeah.
Are public expected to carry their own e-meter Why do we often see people carrying small luggage bags entering building?
Yeah, well, if you're an auditor, you're expected to have 2 e-meters. So when you enter a building, if you see somebody with if they're a hard case, they look like a luggage bag. Although sometimes people use actual luggage with wheels because they're going to have a lot of other things. They might have 2 e-meters in there. They might have like some auditing materials, some correction lists, so that when they get into an auditing session, a lot of it has to do with correction lists. I mean, when I was getting audited in the early days, I think I spent more money on correction lists, and you pay for it. If they make a mistake, you pay for it anyway. They pull out a correction. Oh, mistake made on life repair. Okay, correction list for that, and they'll go through. Oh, this is reading da 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 da, and $3,000 later, they go, no, well, and I remember once going to the registrar and saying, look, I'm not buying anything unless if I pay for another intensive, can you guarantee me that I will be actually back on the bridge and not just doing correction all the time? And so he said, oh, let me check with the CS. So he came back and says, yeah, for sure. Do you think I was back on it? I was just, because I didn't get wins like everybody else. I was like, it was just never a winning scenario for me in Scientology auditing.
Me neither.
And for Willie too, she says. Could requiring someone to summarize the OT3 stuff as on the body things be useful to filter out someone infiltrating protesters? That's a good question. You know what I think might be the best thing to do if you want to find out? Well, actually, the OT3 stuff might be, unless the person has done OT3, then it's not going to bother them. They might be angry that you're spilling that, but the thing is, I think probably if it's a staff member, or especially an OT or a Sea Org member, if you said, what do you think about David Miscavige? If they're a plant or an infiltrator and they're a Scientologist, there's no way in a million years they're going to say anything negative about David Miscavige, even if it's to convince. They might say something negative about the org or their senior or something. They might say something negative about anything except David Miscavige. That's my thought anyway. But the OT3 stuff maybe too. There's probably a way in there as well. Do we plan to do more lives during the week? Can't get enough. Oh, that's nice of you to say. So here's the thing. We're heading out of town, and we're going to go out west to do to check out the Winnipeg org and their ideal org building, which has been decaying for over a decade. When we were still kind of in and under the radar, we were out in Winnipeg, and we went down there to the building, and back then it was just decrepit and crumbling. So we're going to go back, and I'll do a kind of a walk around. We'll go up to the current org, and then I'll walk down to the ideal org. It's a couple of blocks away. How is the meter different these days than auditing in the 70s? So in the 70s, we had different meters. We had the Mark V. I think you even had Mark IVs then in the 70s. But Mark V was that wooden one. You've probably seen pictures. The wooden one. Actually, if you see any of Tony Ortega's live videos and stuff, you'll see behind him. Sometimes he has a Mark V meter. And then they went to the Mark VI. So when I was auditing on the OT levels, I used the Mark VI. Then they had the Mark VII. Now I think it's in the Mark VIII now. Is that the one they're in now? Anyway, the new one though, the funky thing about that is that you have to, like in the old days, you had to send your meter in, I think every year or whatever, in order to get it recertified. All they do is they go in, they look at it, and they go, yeah, and then charge you the money. So now what they do is you plug it in, and if you're not in good standing in Scientology, they'll disable it. You could pay $5,000 for that meter, and after a year, it'll stop working, or if you try to plug it in and you're not in good standing, you're out. And if you have 2 meters, that's $10,000 down the drain right there. You can't sell them because they're useless to anybody. So, yeah. Do Scientologists often share what OT level they're on with the public? Of course, not protest, but can you tell? Can they tell that to an SP? Yeah, you can say what OT level you're on. You just can't discuss anything about it. Typically, somebody not in Scientology won't ask what OT level are you on. Another Scientologist might, but yeah, a protester could ask a Scientologist. But if you're talking to a Sea Org member, I would guess 95% of the time they're not going to be on an OT level, unless they paid for it themselves from money they had prior to getting in the Sea Org. Most Sea Org members just never even get to clear. You know, they're supposed to get all their auditing and training free, but their auditing kind of slips by the wayside unless they get a few maybe auditing things that supposedly help them on their post, and then and training is usually geared to like their posts. So they're not going to get a lot of, and unless they're going to become an auditor, and then they'll get auditor training. But and some of them will have to get up the bridge if they're going to train up to be like an auditor that's going to audit OTs. But you know, Scientology, the war has changed for Scientology. It used to clear the planet. And in order to clear the planet, they had to deliver auditing and training. And the war has changed now to, like, there's very little, if any, auditing and training done. I mean, it's only done like a token amount. The push is always just for money, whether it's for the IAS or buildings. So the war now is the war chest. And the war chest is basically the scavenge slush fund, and which he puts into buildings. And the reason he puts into buildings is so that he's not going to be nailed by the IRS for just stockpiling money and cash. But as far as the war to clear the planet goes, they've almost pretty much given up on that. There's not really very much push at this point to do auditing and training anymore. There is some, sure, but you know, the training that's being done, orgs will send people in for their admin training to, you know, boom their org or something or whatever. But as far as learning to be auditors, and then there's no more St. Hill special briefing course. They're slowly just getting out. It's not that they're giving up on it, the auditing and training, because they have to kind of keep it there because that's kind of what Scientology is supposed to be about. But they only keep it there as a PR move. Well, I mean, also they do make some money off it. Do you know if any of your kids or any Sea Orgs were able to pick up their position when joining, to pick their position? No, from what I understand, like I say, I wasn't in the Sea Org, but I know a number of people who were promised certain posts when they went into the Sea Org, and they get in there and, oh no, I'm sorry, you're not going there, you're going over here, or you know, whatever. They very, very few, if any, get to choose. Once you sign up and you're in the Sea Org, you're at their mercy for anything, whether they own your time, your life, your everything, your like your labor. You know, that you really don't have any choice at that point. You know, for that. So, did we have any other questions that came in? Or okay, so I'm probably going to wrap this up maybe a little early, unless we have more questions. You can ask me anything. I'm an open book. And I'm not the book of war, the art of war. I'm the book of peace, I guess. What would you guess the status of Scientology with the vanity plate Freed 8 to be? Freed 8. I don't know. Maybe an OT8 that got out. I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question. D8. I don't know. Freed 8. Don't know. Question. There's so much controversy regarding the state of clear and Hubbard's clearing methodology and backslide. Was Hubbard licensed to operate any of these things? Licensed to operate any of these things? There's no licensing except what he made up. Even his supposed PhD came from a place called Sequoia University, which was a diploma mill. And I heard that maybe he even kind of owned part of it or something. Anyway, basically you write them, I want a PhD in psychology or something, and they'll send you one. I don't think they're operating anymore, but there are other diploma mills out there. So if you want a fake diploma mill, but see, back then in the 60s, there was no internet. So for someone to go and research Sequoia University and the fact that Hubbard claimed to be a PhD, it was a lot more difficult. I mean, even his war thing, but nowadays it's all public domain now. You can access it all. His war records are well known to be, you know, they're exposed, and he's been exposed as a liar at this point.
Groups that have their charitable status revoked in Canada. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if the charitable groups in Canada have tax. I don't know if nonprofits or if they have tax exemption or not.
I don't think so.
I know that Scientology does not have tax exemption in Canada, and they're not a recognized religion. I don't know about the friend groups. I would not think so. Maybe some of them are. I don't know. That's something to check out. We have to take a look.
It says here, does Willie have any words or input?
Does Willie have any words or input? Willie's always...
I'm Phil's support.
No.
So I'm here to help Phil.
Yeah.
I'm in the background. That's my job.
Willie's in the fort. Willie holds me up. Believe me, Willie holds me up. I couldn't do this without her. Anyway, so we're leaving this week to go out west, and oh, Haggis Bastard, good for you. That's awesome. I know you guys are doing some great work. The Toronto live streamers and the Toronto activists are doing some great work. I'm really impressed by lately there was a couple of police departments that had some of the drug-free world, the Scientology front group drug-free world, on their websites. The Toronto anti-Scientologist activists informed the police departments, there have been two so far, that they've had the drug-free world part taken off their websites. So, the RCMP we had done a couple of years back. Now the OPP, I don't know if they have them on their website, but I know my sister used to go in with the OPP into schools to do drug lectures. So I don't know if the OPP is still working with Drug Free World or not. It's something to check out.
I don't think so.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to end the live stream here, if I can remember how to do it here. Do you think they're still using Drug Free World in schools to recruit? Yes, they are. Anything Scientology does is going to be ultimately a recruit for public relations reasons. Like they do it.
And photo ops.
Photo ops, but they do it for PR, like to position themselves like they're actually legitimate. If they have a chance to, like if someone has their materials and they call in for information, somehow or other, they're going to get them on the list and try to recruit them. They're not very successful these days at any recruitment, because anybody nowadays in school is going to Google Scientology and they're going to just find out what they're about. So chances of them recruiting a student nowadays has got to be pretty rare. So anyway, all right. Last chance for a question. Anyway, a nice little kayaks off here. Do you think it's possible to mail it to Emily? No, she would not get them. We actually were there protesting once, and I had a letter in my hand, and there was one of the executives that was getting out of his car and going into that door. I managed to go up to him and say, "Can you give this to Emily?" But I guarantee she didn't get it. They would filter that out. They're not going to get mail to her. That's just not going to happen at this point. Well, thank you, Matt. I look, everybody, I appreciate you guys just showing up. I'm doing this once a week, but I still get nervous about it, and the technical things still puzzle me. to be honest, I almost did it wrong when I logged it. Initially, I wasn't logging, so somehow I wasn't logging into my scheduled live stream. It was starting to set up a new one. I realized what I was doing. I had to back out of it all and get into the right one. So technically, I'm still a noob, but hopefully someday I'll get smooth enough. And I'll try to do a little bit more occasionally if I can think of stuff to talk about. Can't use the newbie excuse anymore. Well, okay. I'll try to smooth it out a little. Okay, look, I love all you guys, I really do, and I just so appreciate that you show up for me to doing these live streams, and hopefully some of the information is useful and kind of give you some people that are on the ground an idea of what they're up against in the mindset of Scientologists in the area. And I'll put that policy up as soon as I get a chance, hopefully this evening, but if not by morning, I will have it up there. And all right, so here we go. That button. Oh, what did I do? I did the wrong here. See, I did it wrong already. Oh, I did something wrong here. All right, I did it all wrong. All right.